Have you ever heard whispers in the wind that didn't belong to the living? Have you ever stepped into a place so drenched in death that even your soul begged you to leave? No? Then you've never been to the bayou. Hidden deep within the moss-choked swamps of Louisiana lies a cursed stretch of land, untouched by time, forsaken by light, and feared by all who know its name. Some call it Le Marais Noir, the Black Marsh. Others don't call it anything at all, because those who speak of it rarely survive to say much more. They say the trees bleed sap that smells like rotting flesh, and the water murmurs secrets from another world. But it's not just nature that stalks these parts. No, it's something older, crueler, hungrier, something born of pain, sealed beneath the surface by blood rites long forgotten. But seals break, and when they do, darkness comes flooding in. This is not a tale for the faint of heart. It's a plunge into madness, a descent into nightmares that claw at your sanity. It's a story where every step forward might be your last, where shadows whisper your name and the past never stays buried. Are you ready to take the journey, to follow the cursed footsteps of those who dared enter the bayou and never came back the same? Then click like, smash that subscribe button, and share this with the bravest soul you know, because you'll want someone by your side when the screams begin. Now here's a question to sink your teeth into. If you had to choose between knowing the truth and staying alive, which would you pick? Comment below, but beware. The bayou listens. The map was old, its edges torn and crusted with years of dried earth. Ink lines faded to the color of ancient bruises traced the twisting rivers and dense forests of southern Louisiana. At the center of it all, marked with a red X and a circle of ash smudged by time, was the place no one dared speak of, Le Marais Noir. Cameron Hart adjusted his cracked glasses, staring at the symbol that had haunted his dreams for months. The nightmares began after his father's disappearance during a solo expedition into the bayou. A respected anthropologist, Dr. Thomas Hart, had spent his life chasing ancient legends, and it was one in particular that lured him to the swamp, a tale of a lost village consumed by darkness, cursed by its own greed and sealed away by a ritual soaked in blood. But Thomas never returned. Only this map, mailed from an anonymous source, arrived a year later, bundled with a cryptic message. Find him if you dare, but beware. The swamp never gives back what it takes. Cameron wasn't going alone. He'd assembled a team of four: Vanessa Ness Rourke, a bold, tattooed folklorist with a knack for tracking obscure legends; Julian Cross, a thrill-seeking ex-Marine turned documentary filmmaker, carrying enough gear to shoot a war zone; Theo Griggs, a quiet, brooding man whose family had once lived near the bayou before tragedy drove them away. And then there was Cameron, stubborn, sleep-deprived, and desperate for answers. They set off in a beat-up van, the radio cutting out every time they neared a back road. Strange static hissed through the speakers, sometimes sounding eerily like whispers. None of them spoke of it. As the city fell behind, the world twisted. Trees loomed taller, their branches gnarled like skeletal fingers. Thick mist blanketed the ground, curling around their ankles like cold smoke. The deeper they drove, the more the road crumbled into dirt, then gravel, then nothing. They parked at the edge of a forgotten trailhead, where a weather-worn sign read simply, "Turn back." Ness laughed nervously. Well, that's promising. Julian, camera in hand, panned across the sign. Day one of the hard expedition, and already I feel like we've made a terrible mistake. Theo didn't laugh. He hadn't said a word since they passed an abandoned church an hour back, its steeple sagging like it had been weeping. They trekked into the swamp, boots sinking into soggy earth. The air grew heavier, buzzing with insects and thick with decay. Spanish moss hung low like drapes of death. The sounds of civilization faded fast. No birds, no frogs, only the occasional distant splash that echoed longer than it should. 3 hours in, they found the first sign. A rusted lantern dangled from a crooked branch, still flickering faintly with green fire. No one could explain how it burned, or why the flame danced even when there was no wind. Beneath it, nailed to a tree, was a jawbone, human by the looks of it, with dried blood smeared across the teeth in the shape of a spiral. Theo whispered, "It's a marker. They used to hang bones to ward off spirits, or to guide them." "Guide them where?" Cameron asked. Theo only shook his head. As dust settled, they set up camp. A single tent surrounded by 4 torches, Julian insisted on lighting with a chemical fire blend that could supposedly burn even underwater. They made jokes to ease the tension, ate cold canned beans, and watched the fog thicken around them. That night, the hallucinations began. Cameron awoke to the sound of wet footsteps circling the tent. He sat up, flashlight trembling in his hand, and saw the shadow pass along the canvas wall. It was tall, hunched, moving strangely, like it wasn't used to walking upright. He burst from the tent, only to find nothing, not even footprints in the mud. Ness screamed. The group ran toward her voice, finding her standing by the edge of a stagnant pool, her eyes wide with terror. She pointed at the water. "There was a woman, in the water. She was smiling at me." Julian scanned with his night vision camera, catching something, a faint outline just beneath the surface, pale and bloated. But when he zoomed in, the screen glitched and filled with static. The water was still. No one slept. By morning, a rancid smell hung in the air. Dead animals lined the path they planned to follow. Possums, birds, even a small deer, all torn open as though something had clawed its way out of them. Theo knelt beside one, his face pale. "Something is watching us, something old." They kept moving. Around noon, they reached the remains of a shack, half swallowed by vines, windows shattered. Inside, papers were strewn across the floor, pages torn from journals, some written in a strange language none could translate. But in the back room, they found what made Cameron's stomach twist. A Polaroid, faded and stained with mildew. It showed his father, face gaunt, eyes hollow, standing beside a woman with pitch-black eyes. Behind them, the bayou stretched out like an endless void. A handwritten message was scrawled beneath in red ink. "She chose him. Now she waits for you." The temperature dropped. Suddenly, a low guttural growl rumbled through the trees. Not animal, not human, something in between. The shack walls shuddered, dust cascading from the ceiling. They ran. Branches whipped their faces, the forest groaning with every step. Cameron's lungs burned. Julian tripped, camera clattering into the mud. Ness helped him up, her eyes darting in every direction. Theo stopped. "Do you hear that?" Everyone froze. A voice, soft, childlike, drifted from the fog ahead. "Help! Me! Please!" A girl's voice, crying. Cameron stepped forward, but Theo grabbed his arm. "Number, that's not a child." "That's it." The fog parted slightly, revealing a small figure in a white dress, her back turned to them. Her head slowly twisted around. Too far, revealing a face sewn shut with barbed wire. Her eyes were wide and crying. Not tears, but tiny insects that scurried down her cheeks and into the mud. She opened her mouth and screamed. Not a human scream, a shriek that seemed to come from inside their skulls, ripping through thought and memory. Julian dropped the camera. Ness fell to her knees. Theo pulled a charm from around his neck and hurled it at the girl. A flash of blinding light. When their vision cleared, she was gone. Only the wire remained, coiled on the ground like a waiting serpent. No one said a word for a long time. Cameron finally spoke. "We're going to keep going." Theo's hands trembled. "If we do, we might never come back." Cameron stared into the depths of the swamp, where the fog never lifted and the air pulsed with dread. "Then we go forward, into the heart of it." The silence that followed the girl's vanishing scream felt worse than the noise itself. It stretched over the group like a shroud, suffocating and complete. Cameron gritted his teeth, trying to will his legs forward. The others hesitated, as if some invisible force was rooting them to the muck beneath their boots. Julian finally broke the tension. "That thing, that girl, whatever the hell it was, it knew we were coming." Ness was pale, clutching a string of antique copper beads she'd found earlier in the shack. "This place isn't just cursed. It's alive. It wants us." Theo said nothing, his gaze fixed on the horizon, where the fog thickened into a wall that looked almost solid. With a silent nod, he took the lead again. They walked. The trail twisted and narrowed. the trees bending unnaturally close together, their bark weeping black sap that stuck to their clothes like tar. Every step forward seemed to drain the color from the world. The sunlight above was now only a faint glow, filtering through the canopy like it was struggling to reach them. Cameron checked the compass strapped to his wrist. The needle spun wildly. "We're being led somewhere," he muttered. After an hour, they stumbled upon an old wooden bridge, barely clinging to life above a sludgy, slow-moving stream. The wood groaned with every step. Ness paused halfway across, pointing at something beneath the water. It looked like a statue at first, stone gray, unmoving. Then it blinked. A humanoid figure, eyes wide and milky, stared up from just beneath the surface. It didn't move, didn't swim, just watched. Dozens more revealed themselves as the group stared down, their forms distorted beneath the water's surface, faces slack with open mouths like they were all mid-scream. Theo whispered, "The hollow ones." Julian gave him a sideways glance. "You've heard of them?" "My grandmother used to tell stories. She said they were the souls of those who tried to steal from the swamp. Their bodies were taken, their spirits emptied. Now they float forever, waiting for someone to join them." A wet hand slapped onto the bridge, then another. A hollow one began to rise, its soggy skin stretching and popping like rotten meat as it pulled itself onto the wooden slats. Its jaw unhinged, leaking mud and brine, its mouth a gaping black hole that vibrated with a low hum. The others followed, dragging themselves from the water, swaying like puppets with tangled strings. "Run!" Cameron shouted. The group tore across the bridge as the figures shambled after them. Julian tossed his gear bag behind him as bait. It worked, briefly. The creatures dropped to claw through it, sniffing for something within. Theo pulled a flare gun from his coat and fired a round into the air. The red flame burst high above, illuminating a stone archway up ahead, half covered in vines and mud. Beyond it, the swamp seemed darker, deeper. The moment they crossed under it, the hollow ones stopped chasing. They just stood there, unmoving. "They can't pass," Ness said between gasps. "It's like a ward." Cameron looked back at the arch. Strange runes glowed faintly along its curve, pulsing like a dying heartbeat. "Whatever's on the other side is worse." The path split into two, one leading toward a grove of skeletal trees wrapped in yellow moss, the other into a ravine where fog spilled like dry ice, too thick to see through. Theo spoke for the first time in hours. "We go left." "Why?" Julian asked. "Because the right path is too quiet." They moved into the grove, where the air smelled like copper and decay. The ground was littered with small, bone-like objects. Not animal bones, but fingers. Dozens of them, some fresh, others fossilized. They came to a clearing centered around a gnarled tree that bled sap the color of rust. Carvings covered its trunk. Names, symbols, dates. But one word appeared over and over, etched with violent precision. "Écorché." Ness's voice was a whisper. "That means flayed in French." Suddenly a scream shattered the air, high-pitched and agonized. It came from the fog beyond the ravine. "Someone's out there," Cameron said. "No," Theo growled. "That's bait. It wants to divide us." Julian was already moving. "But what if someone's still alive?" Before anyone could stop him, he disappeared into the mist. "Julian!" Ness called after him. No answer. They waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The mist thickened, swallowing the trees behind them. A low humming began to rise, not from outside, but inside their skulls. Cameron dropped to his knees, gripping his head as flashes of images tore through his mind. His father's face screaming in terror, a woman in a veil offering him a bowl of worms, a massive eye opening beneath the swamp waters. Theo gritted his teeth and slammed a bone charm into Cameron's hand. The vision stopped immediately. "Don't listen to the swamp," he said, voice trembling. "It speaks in madness." Just as they turned to leave, Julian stumbled out of the fog, his face pale and eyes unfocused. He was soaked in blood, not his own. "What happened?" Cameron asked. Julian didn't answer. He only repeated a single phrase over and over. "She's under the roots. She's under the roots." When they tried to question him, he began to scream. The next hour was a blur, dragging Julian along as he muttered gibberish, crossing deeper into the heart of the bayou, where the trees grew wider than houses and their branches curled in impossible directions. Finally, they reached a massive clearing. In the center stood a stone altar covered in rotting vines. Atop it sat a pile of bones, arranged into a human shape. But something was wrong. Too many limbs, too many eyes carved into the skull. A book lay open beside the altar. Its pages shimmered with ink that seemed to move. Cameron stepped forward, pulled by some invisible force. Theo held him back. "Number, that's what it wants." But Cameron couldn't look away. On the open page, words began to form, not written by hand, but seeping from the parchment like sweat. "She waits beneath. Feed the soil. Join the silence." Then from the shadows, a sound, dragging chains, the crack of bones bending, wet breathing. Something ancient was stirring, something hungry. The dragging chains came closer. Each link scraped against stone and soil with a shriek that curdled blood. The altar trembled, and the pile of bones began to shake, clattering and shifting like something inside them was still trying to escape. The forest around the group seemed to exhale, a foul wind rolling through the clearing, carrying with it the scent of rot, old blood, and burned hair. Cameron backed away from the book, the words still writhing on the page, glowing faintly. "We shouldn't be here," he whispered. Julian, eyes vacant, mumbled to himself, still repeating, "She's under the roots. She's under the roots." Theo grabbed the camera from his hands and smashed it against a rock. "This thing's recording everything. That's a mistake." Ness flinched. "You think it can see through the lens?" "I think it already has." Before anyone could reply, the trees to the east shuddered. Something massive pushed between their trunks, bending them like saplings. A shape emerged, tall, lean, hunched. Its skin was translucent and slick, stretched tight over long limbs. Chains were embedded in its arms, trailing behind it like tails. Its face was a mask of black bark, gnarled into a twisted smile. No eyes, no nose, just a slit mouth full of sharp, green-glowing teeth. It sniffed the air and pointed at Cameron. "Run!" Theo roared, yanking Cameron by the collar. The group scattered into the swamp, branches whipping at their faces, roots clawing at their feet like skeletal hands. Behind them, the creature shrieked, not in pain or anger, but in joy, like the hunt had only just begun. They ran blindly through the dense woods, deeper into the mire. Their flashlights flickered, batteries failing under some unseen force. Each flicker showed the creature closer, swinging between trees like an insect, limbs bending at impossible angles, always smiling. Ness screamed as something grabbed her ankle. She toppled, face first into the mud. When Cameron turned to help, he froze. A hand, no, a full arm, was reaching up from the earth, fingers covered in moss and slick with slime. It pulled her slowly, hungrily, into the dirt. Theo slashed at it with a machete. The hand hissed, releasing Ness as it sank back into the soil like it had never existed. They didn't stop running until they collapsed near the edge of a shallow lagoon. Julian dropped to his knees, panting, eyes darting. "It's gone!" But Theo didn't agree. "Number, it's watching. That thing's a guardian, not of us." Of her, Cameron sat up. "Who is she?" Theo's eyes darkened. "The one beneath the bayou, the priestess, the witch, the reason this place is cursed." Cameron recalled his father's journal entries, the fragments he managed to decode, mentions of a ritual, of a betrayal, of the awaken. Ness leaned against a moss-covered stone, her voice shaking. "I read a story once about a healer woman, hundreds of years ago. The villagers turned on her, accused her of witchcraft. They skinned her alive and buried her beneath the roots of a black tree. But before she died, she whispered a curse." "What kind of curse?" Cameron asked. "That they would feel her pain forever, that they would never know peace, even in death." Suddenly, Julian bolted upright. "Something's wrong." They turned and saw the water of the lagoon boiling, frothing like acid. Bubbles burst on the surface, releasing a stench so foul it forced them to gag. From the center of the pool, a head rose, a skull draped in strands of moss, its mouth wide in a silent scream. More followed. Bodies. Dozens. All hovering upright in the water. They began to whisper, not out loud but inside their minds. Feed the roots. The roots remember. She remembers. Theo grabbed Ness's hand. Don't listen. It's another illusion. But it wasn't. The whispers were making Julian twitch, his fingers clawing at his ears. Blood streamed from his nose. Make it stop! Make it stop! He plunged his head into the water. No! Cameron lunged, pulling him back. But Julian's body had gone rigid. His eyes were rolled back, mouth foaming. Ness slapped him. Theo tried CPR, but it was no use. Julian was gone, and still his lips moved. She waits beneath the tree. Dig, dig. Then his body burst into flames. Blue fire, cold to the touch. No one could explain it. His body was reduced to ash in seconds, leaving only the melted strap of his camera bag and a small stone. The same color as the altar. Cameron picked it up. It pulsed in his hand like a heartbeat. A direction formed in his mind. We have to go north. How do you know? Ness asked, tears streaking through the mud on her cheeks. I just do. They pressed on. The deeper they went, the more the swamp changed. Gravity twisted. Trees grew sideways. Frogs with too many eyes croaked backwards. Even time felt unreliable. Shadows moved against the sun. One moment it was midday, the next it was dusk again. Eventually they arrived at a wide clearing where the trees parted around a single, colossal cypress. Its roots were exposed, twisted and blackened, forming a spiral pattern in the earth. At the base of the tree, something pulsed, like a second heart beneath the dirt. Theo stepped back. This is it. The stone in Cameron's hand vibrated violently. They were supposed to dig. As they began, the ground resisted them like it was alive. Roots curled around their arms, scratched their skin, tried to choke their tools. But eventually they uncovered something. A face, buried just beneath the surface. Skinless, raw, yet somehow preserved. Its eyes snapped open. Ness screamed. Theo dropped his shovel. The mouth opened, and it breathed. The sound echoed through the swamp like a horn announcing death. Behind them, the forest erupted in motion. The creature with chains returned, but now it was not alone. Figures moved with it, walking corpses with glowing eyes and slit mouths, chanting in tongues that hurt the ears. The priestess had awakened, and she was hungry. The earth trembled. Roots snapped like whips, flinging dirt and stone into the air. Cameron stumbled back, clutching the glowing stone as it pulsed violently, burning his skin. The thing in the soil, the face, was watching him. No eyelids, no flesh. Just glistening red muscle stretched tight across a skull that shouldn't have been conscious, and yet it breathed. It whispered. The words came from beneath the surface, echoing through the soil and vibrating in their bones. You found me, child of betrayal. Theo dragged Cameron away just as a massive root shot from the ground, impaling the shovel he had dropped. It quivered, then pulled the tool into the ground like it had swallowed it whole. From the tree line, the chained creature approached, its grin now wider, splitting its head almost in half. Behind it shuffled a congregation of the dead, their hollow eyes fixed forward. They didn't groan. They didn't stagger. They simply walked in perfect rhythm, moving in tandem with the throbbing breath of the thing under the tree. Ness gripped her machete, knuckles white. We woke her up. Cameron stared at the pulsing soil. She's always been awake. We just opened the door. The stone in his hand began to crack, glowing brighter with each second. Symbols etched across its surface rearranged themselves, forming a spiral that pulsed like a heartbeat. Drop it, Theo said. I can't. Cameron winced. It's like it's inside me. Behind them, the dead began to chant. Their voices rose and fell like a wave. No language, just pure sound. Dissonant. Wrong. It scraped at the edges of their minds. Ness screamed and dropped to her knees, clutching her ears. Make it stop! Theo grabbed her and pulled her behind the massive tree roots. The chanting grew louder. Suddenly, a scream echoed across the clearing. Julian's voice. But he was dead, burned to ash. And yet there it was again, screaming for help. Cameron turned, his stomach twisting. There at the edge of the clearing stood Julian, whole, alive, naked and shaking, his face pale and confused. "Cam," he called out. "Cam, it's me." But Cameron didn't move. His gut screamed no. His mind recoiled. Something was wrong with Julian's face. The way his eyes moved, too smooth, too mechanical. Ness stood. "Julian?" Theo stepped in front of her. "That's not him. Don't go to it." The creature that looked like Julian took a step forward, and with a twitch, his face peeled back, folding away like paper, revealing a blank, fleshless mask beneath. Its mouth opened impossibly wide and released a screech that knocked them all back. The ground cracked. The massive cypress tree split open down the center like a wound, and inside was a hollow chamber, slick and glistening like the inside of a rib cage. Runes burned across the bark, casting a blood-red glow. A staircase of tangled roots descended into the darkness below. The priestess called, and the swamp listened. Cameron knew they had no choice. "If we run now, she'll drag us back. We're in this." Theo spat into the dirt. "Then let's take the fight to her." They stepped into the tree. The air inside was colder, sharper. Every breath sliced the throat. The deeper they went, the tighter the roots coiled around them. The glow from the stone in Cameron's hand dimmed, pulsing slower now, like a dying heart. After what felt like hours, the staircase opened into a cavernous chamber. It was a cathedral of rot. Bones formed the walls. Skulls made up the pillars. The floor was a mural of death, images carved into the very stone, showing scenes of ritual, sacrifice, and madness. In the center of the chamber stood a stone throne, overgrown with thorns and vines, and upon it she sat, the priestess. Her skin was gone, yet her body glistened with blood that never dried. Her eyes were black voids, endless and consuming. Hair like seaweed draped over her face, and from her mouth black smoke poured endlessly, swirling around her like living ink. Theo raised his weapon, but his arms froze mid-swing. The machete hovered, unmoving. He screamed, but no sound came out. Cameron stepped forward, stone clutched in his fist, the heat now unbearable. The priestess smiled, and the chamber pulsed with energy. "You carry the shard," she said, not with her mouth, but directly into his mind. "The final piece. The blood of your father spilled it, and now you offer it to me." Cameron shook his head. "I didn't come here to give you anything." She rose from the throne, her body creaking with the sound of bending wood and breaking bone. "You came to end this, but you are part of it." She raised her hand, and the chamber trembled. Roots shot from the floor, wrapping around Ness and Theo. Cameron screamed, lunging forward, but the priestess waved her hand, and he slammed against the wall, pinned by unseen force. Visions flooded his mind. He saw his father, young, terrified, standing in the same chamber, holding the same stone. He was not alone. Behind him stood others, a coven cloaked in darkness, whispering in tongues. They bled into the soil, they fed her, and then they were gone. Cameron's father had fled, taking the stone with him, betraying the pact, cursing the land. The priestess moved closer now, towering above him. "Your blood carries the sin, but also the key." The stone burst in his hand. Light filled the chamber. Cameron screamed, but it wasn't from pain. It was from knowing. The knowledge poured into him. Ancient, forbidden. He understood what the stone was, what it opened, what it demanded in return. He looked up at her, eyes wide, and said one word: "No." Then the chamber shook again, a different kind of rumble, from above, the surface. The ground cracked open, water poured in. The swamp was collapsing. The priestess let out a shriek of fury, and the walls began to fall. Theo broke free from the roots. He grabbed Ness, hauling her toward the staircase as the chamber filled with water. Cameron struggled to his feet, the glowing mark of the stone now burned into his palm. The priestess lunged toward him, shrieking like a hurricane, and everything went white. Cameron gasped. Water flooded his lungs. For a moment he couldn't tell up from down. Only the crushing cold and the taste of dirt-choked swamp water on his tongue. The light from the stone was gone. All that remained was the weight of his own heartbeat and the echo of the priestess's scream still ringing in his ears. He kicked blindly through the murky water, hands clawing at twisted roots and floating debris, until at last he burst to the surface. Gulping air, coughing out bile and blood, he spun in circles. The cypress tree was gone. The throne room, the entire chamber, swallowed whole. The swamp had reclaimed her, but something felt wrong. The sky was an impossible shade of gray, layered with swirling clouds that moved like ink in water. The trees around him weren't the same ones from before. They stretched taller, wider, some cracked open like ribs. The air vibrated with whispers, soft, nearly silent, but constant. He wasn't in the same place anymore, or maybe not the same time. Ness emerged from the water nearby, sputtering and panicked. "Cam!" she cried. "Where's Theo?" "Did he?" Before she could finish, the water behind her erupted, and Theo surfaced with a scream, dragging something dark and wet from his back. A leech the size of a rat slapped to the ground and burst like rotten fruit. "She's not dead," he gasped, looking around. "We're still in it." The bayou was twisted now. Everything moved slower, like time was syrup. The sun didn't shine, it watched, an unmoving red circle behind the clouds. The trees whispered names, sometimes their own, sometimes the names of people they'd lost. "Where the hell are we?" Ness asked. Cameron felt the burn in his palm, the mark of the stone now fully embedded in his skin like a brand. "The priestess took us deeper, below the swamp, where her roots spread." He paused, grimacing. "We're not in the world anymore." Theo staggered to his feet. "Then how do we get back?" But Cameron didn't have an answer. The whispers were growing louder. They turned as one toward the source. A figure approached from between the trees, stumbling, limping, moaning. Its face was wrapped in vines, eyes gouged out, skin sloughing from its bones like wet paper. It groaned, not from pain, but from hunger. It raised one hand, pointing directly at Cameron. More figures emerged behind it. Dozens. Some walked, some crawled, others simply flowed, dragging broken limbs behind them. All of them were bound in strands of roots, bark growing through their bones. Victims of the priestess, trapped between life and death. Servants. "Run," Cameron said. They fled again, this time through a path that hadn't been there before. The ground squelched beneath their feet, bleeding black liquid. Trees bent to block their way, then twisted open to reveal new paths. The swamp itself was changing, warping around them like a labyrinth. It wasn't natural, it was alive, and watching. Theo took point, hacking at vines and branches with his machete, while Ness covered the rear. Cameron ran between them, the brand on his hand acting like a compass, pulling him forward. But the forest wouldn't let them go so easily. They came to a bridge, if it could be called that, made from bones lashed together with swamp hair and blood. It spanned a bottomless chasm of fog. As they stepped onto it, the bones creaked, and the mist below churned, revealing writhing shapes. Hands, faces, and eyes, all blinking and screaming silently. Halfway across, the bridge buckled. Cameron fell to his knees, grabbing at the bones as something lashed out from the fog. A hand made of twisted root and bone. It grabbed his ankle, pulling hard. Ness dropped beside him, hacking at the tendril with her blade, severing it with a splatter of black sap. Cameron scrambled forward, breath ragged. "This place is testing us." "Testing for what?" Theo asked, helping them up. "Willingness to give up, to give in. She feeds on despair." As they reached the other side, the path opened into a clearing that felt familiar. But it wasn't the same. They were back in the cemetery, or a version of it. The graves were shattered open. Coffins lay rotting in the wet earth. The mausoleum door was gone, replaced with a spiral staircase made of bones that descended into darkness. The whispers became a song, soft and hypnotic. Cameron felt it pulling at his mind. He saw his father again, standing in the graveyard, speaking to someone just out of sight. The image shimmered like a mirage. He stepped forward. Cam, Ness warned, that's not real. I know, he said, but something real is hiding inside the vision. Theo nodded. Then let's go deeper. Down the spiral they went. Each step changed the temperature, from swamp heat to freezing wind, then back again. Their breath fogged, and frost formed on their skin. At the bottom was a chamber, similar to the throne room, but inverted. A hollow root spiraling upward like a funnel, with walls covered in symbols that shifted when looked at. In the center, a pool of black water. Above it, suspended in midair, was a fetus-shaped bundle wrapped in roots and thorns. It pulsed faintly, alive, breathing. Cameron's chest tightened. That's her heart. Theo raised the machete. No, Cameron stopped him. Killing it without severing the curse might make everything worse. Ness looked around. So how do we break it? The symbols on the walls began to move, rearranging themselves into scenes. Cameron walked the perimeter, watching them shift. He saw flashes. A woman in white robes tending to the sick, being dragged through the mud, flayed beneath the tree, her soul sealed into the roots. He saw a man, his father, performing a forbidden rite, splitting a shard from the priestess's heart and running. And then, another scene, a circle of three, one with the mark on his palm. Cameron stepped into the circle. The room groaned. The pool of black water bubbled. The heart above began to beat faster. Ness and Theo joined him. 3 bearers, Cameron whispered. 3 offerings. The mark on his hand blazed. The chamber shrieked. From above, the priestess's voice thundered. You try to unmake me? You, who carry the sin of your line? You think you can erase pain with sacrifice? The heart split open. Light exploded from the core. Cameron fell to his knees, vision blurring. And then, silence. But something was coming. Not from the heart. From beneath them. Something older. Something worse. The priestess wasn't the beginning. She was just the gatekeeper. The silence shattered. A sound, low, vibrating, too deep for human ears but felt in their bones, rose from beneath the black pool. The heart, once pulsing in the air above them, now hung limp, lifeless and dripping, its protective thorns crumbling into ash. Light had poured from it, but what followed that light was worse. Cameron tried to move, but his limbs were heavy. Gravity seemed wrong. His feet dragged on the ground like the air itself had thickened into syrup. Theo held his machete in shaking hands. Something's waking up. No, Ness whispered, backing away from the pool. Something else is coming through. The pool churned. From the black water emerged fingers, impossibly long, twisted like broken antlers. They grasped the edge of the stone basin, wet and glistening. Then came a hand, a wrist, a full arm made of bone and rotted bark, veins crawling like worms beneath its surface. Cameron's skin crawled. Back, he warned. The creature pulled itself into view. It had no face. Instead, a hollow cavity sat where its head should be, a swirling black void, pulsing like a second heart. Its body was too tall, stretching beyond the chamber's height. Roots shifted to accommodate it. The very earth seemed eager to welcome it. Theo stumbled. That's not the priestess. No, Cameron muttered. That's what she served. The hollow god stood at full height, silent but radiating power. The walls of the chamber cracked. Symbols flared like flame and then burst into sparks. The pool of black water receded, leaving only dry, cracked stone. And then the whispers returned, no longer gentle but screaming, layered voices all speaking at once. The roots remember, the blood returns, the seed awakens. The god raised a hand. Cameron felt pressure in his skull. His vision doubled. The mark on his palm sizzled, glowing so hot he dropped to his knees. Images burst through his mind. Cities swallowed by vines, towers rotted into the sea, entire civilizations turned to mulch in the priestess's name. But this god, this thing, had seen far more. It didn't just rule the bayou, it fed on belief, pain, and memory. Don't let it inside, Ness cried. Her eyes were wide, bleeding from the corners. She dropped her blade, clutching her head. Don't let it, Theo suddenly screamed, his feet lifting off the ground. Roots wrapped around his arms and legs, hoisting him toward the hollow god's open chest, a cavity of endless dark. He thrashed, kicked, but the air had become thick and syrupy again. Cameron leapt, grabbing Theo's boot, trying to pull him down. "No!" he shouted. "He's not yours!" The mark on Cameron's hand flared again, this time with a pulse that rejected the hollow god's influence. There was resistance in it, like the shard still held some power of its own. It struck a nerve. The god hissed, a sound like wind rustling through corpses. Cameron focused. He dug into the pain, gritted his teeth, and plunged his burning hand into the wall of the chamber. The symbols returned, this time forming a ring around the hollow god. The roots recoiled. Theo dropped with a sickening thud, coughing blood but alive. "Light!" Cameron grunted. "We need light." "There is no light here," Ness shouted. "Everything here is rot. Darkness feeds it." Cameron's hand bled where the brand had cracked his skin open. "Then we bring light from inside." He stepped forward toward the god. "Cam," Theo barked, "you're gonna get yourself." But the hollow god didn't move. It watched. "You've fed on this place for centuries," Cameron said. "You were born from suffering, birthed in a pit of blood and sacrifice. But your roots only go so deep." The god's form shimmered, twisted, parting for a brief moment to reveal faces in its hollow cavity. His father's, Julian's. "Let them go," Cameron demanded. The hollow god answered not with words but a surge of power. The floor cracked. The walls exploded outward. They were no longer in the chamber, but in the heart of the bayou itself, a swamp of endless depth, floating islands of bone, red sky above, dead trees stretched forever in every direction. Ness landed beside him, panting. "This is a dream," she said, "a dream we're not waking up from." "No," Cameron said. "This is his world, his root space." They had been drawn into the hollow god's dimension, the deep heart of the curse. Here, time fractured. 1 second Cameron was a child again, standing by his father's grave, hearing the priestess's lullaby in the wind. The next he was old, broken, kneeling at the edge of a lake filled with blood. Every version of him splintered across this space, infinite lives twisted by the curse's influence. But there was a thread, a tether, the brand. Cameron gripped it like a lifeline and screamed, drawing from every version of himself at once. All the fear, all the rage, all the love and guilt and pain. The hollow god shrieked. Theo and Ness clung to him as light poured from his hand. Not fire, not magic, just truth. Memories uncorrupted. Human resilience. It struck the hollow god square in the chest. The creature reeled. The faces inside its chest cavity twisted and howled. Roots cracked and withered. The god began to collapse in on itself, but not die. No, it was retreating, curling inward, trying to escape the purity it could not consume. "We're not done," Cameron shouted. He stepped closer, even as the ground beneath them gave way, even as darkness poured upward like a geyser. But the hollow god stopped. Its form, now crumbling, shifted, revealing one last vision. Cameron's father, kneeling before the priestess, offering the stone. But beside him another figure, a woman robed in dark leaves, a crown of bone on her head. A second priestess, a twin. Cameron's eyes widened. There were two. Then everything exploded into white. Silence. Then the sound of rain. Soft, warm, and wrong. Cameron opened his eyes to a world out of balance. He stood in a marshland that bled light and shadow in equal measure. Above him, the sky was a canvas torn in two, one half bright with a sun that never set, the other dark with a moon that never rose. It wasn't just day and night at war. It was creation and decay, truth and madness colliding in real time. He could feel the battle in his chest. The mark on his hand had splintered, not broken, but multiplied. A second sigil now burned beside the first, spiraling in the opposite direction. "Cam!" Ness's voice called through the shifting air. He turned, saw her and Theo stumbling toward him, eyes wide, breath ragged. Theo's jacket was scorched, like he'd walked through fire. Ness's arms bled black ichor, not from wounds but from contact. "We made it out," Theo coughed. "But we're not home." "No," Cameron said. "We're deeper." Before them, the bayou stretched into impossible shapes, trees that walked, rivers that reversed, houses on stilts, suspended in midair, upside down, burning but not consumed. This was the Thorn Realm, the true heart of the curse. Something had changed in Cameron's mind. The hollow god hadn't just attacked him. It had marked him, tried to graft part of its memory into his own. But Cameron had seen beyond the curse, beyond the priestess. He'd seen the second sister. "Did either of you see her?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "The second priestess?" Ness blinked, confused. There was only one. "No," Cameron insisted. "They were twins, one to bind the curse, the other to guard it." Theo frowned. "Then who the hell did we just fight?" "Not the guardian," Cameron whispered. "Just the shell she left behind." Lightning forked across the sky. Thunder rolled, but it didn't sound like thunder. It was more like screaming stone and cracking bone. Then came the laughter. It echoed from every corner of the swamp, high and lilting. A woman's voice, amused, knowing, and bitter. They turned to see her. She stood on the water's surface like it was glass, her gown made of moss and crow feathers, her hair twisting like smoke. One eye was white and lifeless. The other burned gold. In one hand, she held a staff made from the twisted spine of a drowned man. "The brave ones finally crawled to my gates," she said, "and you brought the brand. How adorable." Cameron stood tall. "Are you the twin?" She bowed mockingly. "I was once Kalira, sister to Malveth, the sealer. But names don't matter here." Her smile widened. "What matters is what you took from her." Cameron's fingers brushed the marks on his hand. The stone's power, the brand, her memories. "No," Kalira hissed, stepping closer. "You took her anchor. She is undone now, scattered, and I am free." Behind her, the waters began to boil. Figures floated to the surface, not corpses but reflections. Hundreds of versions of Cameron, Ness, and Theo. Some older, some younger, some already dead. All staring back with hollow eyes. "She's using us," Ness whispered. "She's showing you what could have been," Kalira said. "What still might be." One of the reflections stepped forward. A twisted version of Cameron, rotted and hunched, the brand on his hand blackened with corruption. "You should have given in," it rasped. "You should have let her inside. You were always the weakest one." Cameron looked away, but Theo grabbed him by the shoulder. "Don't listen to it." Kalira raised her staff. The reflection army surged forward. Theo moved first, hacking down the closest mimic. It burst into petals and mud. Ness followed, carving through the illusions with a wild fury. Cameron held his ground, raised his branded hand and shouted, "Enough!" A shockwave of light erupted. The illusions scattered like dust in wind. Kalira's expression turned cold. "You've learned control," she said. "Impressive." "You and your sister made this place a graveyard," Cameron said. "You cursed the land, the bloodlines, the future." "No," Kalira whispered, her smile vanishing. "She did that." Cameron's brow furrowed. "But she bound the hollow god," Kalira hissed, "fed him souls, sacrificed herself to guide him. I tried to stop her. I tried to end it, but she trapped me, sealed me below, gave you her voice." Cameron's stomach twisted. "So this was never about saving us," Kalira nodded. It was always about replacing you." The sky split. From the heavens, a massive root tore downward, embedding itself into the swamp. It pulsed with the same energy as Cameron's brand. From its surface, eyes opened. Dozens of them. One of them was his father's. "They don't die," Kalira whispered. "They just transform. Your father was the first to give himself willingly. He planted the curse. You've come full circle." Cameron's breath caught in his throat. The swamp beneath them cracked open. A platform rose, a circle of stone engraved with twin sigils. Kalira stepped onto it, arms wide. "Let us finish what our blood began," she said. Theo growled. "She wants a ritual." Cameron nodded. Emerging? But of what? Ness asked. Not what, Cameron whispered. Who? The realization hit. Kalira wasn't trying to end the curse. She was trying to become its god. Cameron stepped forward, raising his hand. The mark responded, glowing so bright it bled golden light. The twin sigils on the platform pulsed in response. She needs a vessel, he said. That's why she led us this far. Not to kill us, to choose. But something had changed inside him. The curse, for all its horror, had shown him every side of its twisted lineage. Every failure, every mistake, every soul crushed beneath its roots. He wouldn't be a vessel. He would be the wound it couldn't heal. He took another step. The platform lit up. Kalira raised her staff. Then fight me, she said. But know this. The roots run deeper than love, than death, than light. The only way out is through me. The swamp screamed. Trees ignited. The sky rained blood. And from beneath their feet, something else began to rise. Something ancient. Something worse than the hollow god. The source. The sky cracked like old bone. From the trembling depths of the swamp, the source emerged. Not a creature, not a god, but an origin. It pulsed in grotesque harmony with the land. A mass of gnarled roots, screaming faces, and writhing shadows, so massive it defied shape. Its form twisted between memories, echoing every sacrifice, every cursed whisper, every drop of blood that had ever touched the bayou. It was the curse itself, pure, undiluted, and alive. Cameron stumbled back, the dual sigils on his hand blazing hot, trying to burn through his skin. The ground beneath him fractured. The ritual circle began to spin, rings within rings, carved symbols rearranging themselves with the precision of something ancient waking from eternal sleep. Behold, Kalira whispered, her eyes wide with adoration. The first root, the heart of the hollow. Theo raised his machete, but his hands trembled. How the hell do we fight that? We don't, Ness breathed. We never could. This was never about fighting. The swamp shifted. The source bled memories into the air, visions that stabbed into their skulls like knives. A child, swallowed whole by a pond, re-emerging with no soul. A priestess sinking into a pit of tar, smiling even as her lungs filled. The old gods, not gods at all, but ideas, fears that grew roots in the minds of desperate people. And through it all, the twins. Cameron saw them clearly now. Kalira, the guardian, the rebel, the one who wanted freedom. Malveth, the sealer, the devout, who chose sacrifice over salvation. Together, they had bound the source, split its essence, hidden it beneath layers of myth, feeding it enough just to contain it. But it was never destroyed. Now the seals were broken. Kalira turned to Cameron, her face wild with emotion. You opened the path. You accepted the brand. You awoke it. No, Cameron said, his voice shaking. I came to end it. The source roared. A wind tore across the bayou, flattening trees, sucking the air from their lungs. The ritual circle floated now, suspended above the swamp. Cameron, Ness, and Theo were lifted with it, drawn into the eye of a storm older than the land itself. From the pulsing center of the source, a root uncoiled, not wood, but flesh and spirit. It reached for Cameron, curling around his chest, not constricting, but connecting. He saw everything, his father kneeling before the priestess, Julian's soul screaming beneath the black pool, the hollow god not destroyed, but fragmented, hiding inside the source like a parasite. And then, he saw himself. Not Cameron the survivor, not Cameron the seeker, but Cameron the anchor. He understood. The curse needed balance. Two sides, two souls. The twins had been that balance once. But now with Malveth gone and Kalira corrupted, the scales had tipped. The source had no prison left. Unless, Cameron turned to Kalira. You lied. You wanted this. You never wanted to destroy it. I wanted to become it, she hissed. Not a slave to the curse. Its queen. Its god, Theo shouted over the wind. Cam, what are you saying? There has to be two, Cameron said, his voice steady despite the chaos. One to carry it, one to lock it. The symbols beneath his feet pulsed in time with his heartbeat. The source wrapped around him tighter. He turned to Ness. "Get out of here!" "What?" she shouted. "No, you're not." "Take Theo. Get out. If this thing consumes the bayou, it'll spread. Cities, states, the world. It doesn't stop." Theo stared at him, jaw clenched, but nodded slowly. "We'll finish what you start." The source howled. The final memory hit Cameron like a dagger. His father, offering the stone not in service to evil, but to spare his son. A legacy of pain to buy a moment of peace. Cameron looked down at his branded hand, then back at Kalira. "We end this," he said. He stepped forward. The circle split. Kalira lunged, screaming, her form unraveling into roots and wings and blood. But Cameron caught her hand, forced it into the circle opposite him. The source reacted instantly. Twin marks ignited, one gold, one black. A column of light shot into the sky, piercing the heavens, splitting night from day. The Thorn realm shook. The bayou screamed. All at once, the curse began to fold in on itself, collapsing like a dying star. The source thrashed, roaring as it was pulled inward, back into containment, back into balance. Kalira's form shattered. Her soul, splintered by greed, became dust. But Cameron stood firm. He reached inside himself, into the brand, and spoke the words he didn't know he knew. "By root and bone, by blood and stone, let the hollow sleep." Light and shadow merged. And then, silence. It was weeks later when Theo and Ness found themselves back on solid ground, standing at the edge of the bayou. The swamp had changed. The trees no longer whispered. The water had cleared. The air was heavy, but no longer watching. The curse was broken, but Cameron was gone. Not dead, not lost. Just elsewhere. They both knew it, felt it. He was part of the bayou now. Not trapped, but watching, guarding. The new anchor. A sentinel in the shadows. Some nights, when the wind was just right, Ness could hear his voice on the breeze. Not in fear, not in pain. Just a whisper. "It's over." She turned to Theo, her hand wrapped in his. "We should go." He nodded. "Yeah, but we tell the story. Every word of it. No one forgets." As they walked away, the swamp behind them shimmered, and in the distance, under the moss-draped cypress trees, two faint lights glowed in the dark, gold and black, pulsing in perfect sync. The end. If you made it this far into the cursed heart of the bayou, what would you have done if you were Cameron? Would you have fought or sacrificed? Drop your answer in the comments below. And hey, if you enjoyed this chilling journey into darkness, like, subscribe, and share to keep the nightmares coming. You never know what's lurking in the next shadow. Until next time, keep your eyes open.